For the first time, Lakeshore Public Media is getting an up-close and personal look at municipal government leaders across the region with our new series, Meet the Mayor. Today, we're in Gary to speak to Mayor Eddie Melton. Mayor Melton, so we are here in Gary to get to know you and your community, our region neighbors better. And I want to start with a quick round of rapid fire questions. I always like to start this with mayors because it helps us to get to know you, the man. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Alrighty, so what was your first job and how old were you?
Oh, wow. I had to be 16, worked at Pizza Hut in Miller.
Wow,
Yeah.
what in which area? Were you a cash register or were you kneading the dough?
I did it all. I was a cook, I did the cash register, but that's where I developed those work ethics.
That's awesome. How many unread emails do you have in your inbox?
Oh, wow. Personal or work?
Probably your work.
Not that many unread at work, but
Okay.
a lot of unread personal emails.
Because you're so busy here in
Yeah.
City Hall that you don't get the opportunity to
Right.
kind of check
so
those.
I would say about 1,000 unread personal emails.
Oh
yeah.
my goodness, you better check those. Your friends are probably looking for you. How many times do you set the alarm in the morning, or how many times do you hit the snooze button?
I don't have to. I don't set the alarm. My body just, 4:30 every morning, like clockwork.
4:30 in the morning?
Yeah.
God bless you.
Yeah.
So I have to say that you are, by most standards, even what I would consider a very young man and a career politician, right? So I want to ask you, what's the one piece of advice that you've received, solicited or unsolicited, that you've never forgotten about?
Well, I think when I was first elected in the Senate in 2016, I had a meeting with then Congressman Peter Visklowski, and his information was master your expertise, right?
Wow.
Whatever area you are proficient in, become a master in that, and develop friends and alliances with folks that can help you in other areas. So that helped me kind of go further in my Senate career, and it's helping me right now as mayor.
Absolutely. We'll talk about that a little later, but I think that was actually some wonderful advice, and I really do believe that you took true to that advice. I want to ask you, what's your favorite song and or artist?
It depends on what day of the week and what time of day. So,
Okay.
you know, I love gospel.
Okay, good.
Fred Hammond is one of my favorite gospel artists, and any Fred Hammond song, you know.
Fred Hammond's gospel songs sound a lot like love music too, so you must be a heart guy.
Yeah. You know, he had a love album as well, so.
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah.
That's a good choice. Good
Yeah.
choice. I have to ask you, so if someone was visiting Gary for the first time, but they would be here for just a week and they would not return, what would you recommend they do while they were in Gary?
Well, I think the first thing would be, of course, stopping at our beautiful lakefront. A lot of folks don't realize how much of a large footprint of Lake Michigan that we sit on.
Absolutely.
So visiting the lakefront, taking the opportunity to take a tour through the dunes, visiting, of course, from an entertainment perspective, there's a show in town, going to the Hard Rock Casino, entertainment-wise, and great restaurants, and supporting some of our small business restaurants as well. So I'm a foodie at heart. So
Okay,
I
what's your
would
favorite
definitely-
restaurant? I know these.
I'm not going to say
like
which favorite restaurant locally, but I will say I will say that we have some phenomenal small businesses that's doing a great job in the city of Gary. So I would definitely take a tour on that.
Okay, good. You didn't choose your children.
Right.
What has been your greatest achievement thus far?
Personally or
Professionally.
professionally? Wow, I think professionally, there's many things I can point to as state senator in terms of increasing educational funding, being at the forefront of that to a certain degree. Of course, it was not to the extent that we would like, but also just economic development projects I've been able to bring back home to Gary.
Absolutely. What's been your greatest achievement personally since you brought that up?
I would say my children. Right? Just my wife and I, we've made some not just beautiful but respectable and smart children that have a great future ahead of them. And every time I look at them, I was with them last night. We went bowling, and I was just say I'm blessed.
You know, I'm glad you said that because, and we'll talk about how busy you are, how much in demand you are. I'm glad that you're able to take the time to spend with your family because of the demands of your job.
Yeah.
You don't get to spend as much time as you did in the past. And so I'm glad to hear that you guys went bowling.
Yeah.
I'm sure that they were so happy and just appreciative
Yeah.
to have their dad to themselves and husband
You're right.
to themselves.
Yeah, my daughter was home from college, so it was perfect timing.
Okay, who won?
I didn't. I'll just own that.
Good, good, good. Now, Mayor Melton, as we sit here in City Hall, just weeks away from Thanksgiving, a time of gratitude, a time to give thanks, I have to ask you, what are you most thankful for in your time as mayor thus far?
I'm thankful for a solid team that we put together. 10 months into our administration, I think we've accomplished a lot for a city the size of Gary, especially with the amount of issues that we grapple with. But we've built a very strong and resilient team that's going to help execute the plan that I'm putting forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think that we've gotten a glimpse of you, the man behind the scenes in our rapid fire questions, but I want to spend time talking about you as a mayor and your administration for the duration of our conversation. So
Sure.
I want to talk about you specifically because a lot of people in the region do know you, but we may have some region neighbors that are just kind of unfamiliar with you. So take a moment to spend some time discussing your career in the private sector, in public service, as well as what led you to this office today.
So, born and raised right here in Gary, just a few blocks away from City Hall. Attended Horseman High School, played football there. That led me to college at Kentucky State University, which I played football there for a few years. I finished up at Calumet College, St. Joseph, locally. And my first job was with Edgewater Mental Health. So I worked.
Oh, wow.
I've always worked with youth, and you'll see a theme of that throughout my professional career.
Right.
So working at Edgewater, that helped me kind of build a better understanding of the nonprofits in Northwest Indiana, and especially in the field of mental health. Then from there, I started my own tutoring and mentoring organization.
Oh,
And
wow.
that opened up a door which I was not expecting, and that was a Legacy Foundation. So I worked at the Legacy Foundation for a number of years as a grant officer. I led their grants and
Wow.
helped lead their scholarship efforts
Okay.
at the Legacy Foundation. That opportunity led me to NIPSCO.
Wow.
For a bit, I was at NIPSCO 15 years prior to taking office here in the mayor's office. So
Wow. Wow.
both on government relations to employee engagement to just helping to lead our corporate citizenship at NIPSCO. That was kind of the path that I took, and in which that service led me into looking at running for office.
Okay.
The
Wow.
first position was an appointed position, which was by then Governor Mike Pence, which was on the State Board of Education.
Wow.
Served on the state board for 2 years, and that's when I decided to run for state senate. I realized that if you wanted to make long-term substantive change, you have to change policy,
Correct.
especially in the state of Indiana. So that's when I ran for state senate. My predecessor, Senator Earlene Rogers, God bless her soul, she just passed away, but she was very instrumental in kind of coaching me into getting into that area, and it was no turning back from there.
Wow. And what made you decide to run for mayor for the city of Gary? Because you were quite successful. You were a champion down at the State House, and everyone in the region was rooting for you to continue at the State House. So what made you decide, okay, I want to come back home and become the mayor?
I had to answer that question a lot during the election, right?
Yeah.
I served as ranking minority member on appropriations, state budget committee. I was ranking minority member on the education committee. So
Right.
I probably could have stayed in the Senate for the next 20 years if I wanted to, right?
If
I
not longer.
continued to get elected and do a good job.
Right.
But I don't consider myself to be a career politician.
Okay.
I feel that the resources I was bringing home, the policies I was helping to change, and we'll talk more about the schools and things like that.
Right.
I didn't see how they will be able to be executed or implemented locally at that time.
Okay.
I didn't have the
Interesting.
confidence that it would be able to get executed. And I just made the decision. I said, what is the use of getting all these state accolades, national accolades, and you come home and you haven't been able to turn the corner or move your community forward as much as you can with the resources, relationships that I've been able to acquire over the years. So, it's not about me. It's about what can we do to move the city of Gary forward.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about you being able to forge relationships specifically at the State House and how you have brought them back here. It's quite interesting. You really do have a wonderful story. But I want to take a moment, pivot, and talk about safety for a moment, right? So Congressman Frank Mervan's request for federal community project funding was approved in the fiscal year 2024 appropriations law, and specifically the Gary Police Department received $264,000 to upgrade technology and equipment. What will this mean for crime fighting efforts here in the city of Gary?
Yeah, so, and that's a good question. The way I look at it is, with a city of our size, 52 square miles, the population that we have, a little bit over 70,000 individuals, and a shrinking workforce, both police, fire, and a lot around emergency management services, public safety purposes, we have to look at it in a smarter way. Because we can't police our way to a safer community. We have to look at technology. We have to look at our partners, community groups, and helping us address that. So the funding that Congressman Mervan helped us identify is just going to help us make that available to us with the real-time crime center that we have, tapping into various cameras throughout the entire city, help us solve those crimes a lot quicker than usually in the past.
So let me ask you, because when people speak about Gary, a once thriving community, but sadly became infamous, and I don't like to talk about this, but it sadly became infamous for its crime rates. The city is obviously doing a turnaround with significant changes. I have to ask you, are there plans to expand the law force, to hire more law enforcement officers?
Yeah, that's going to come with the growth of our community, right?
Okay.
The way you pay for police and fire is you have to have more residents. You have to have more of a tax base.
Right.
So as we grow our tax base, of course, we're going to look to bring more police and fire in. But the main thing, which I'll not only campaign on, but I'm showing right now in real time, is how do we protect the ones that we have? How do we keep the ones that we have? We have other communities surrounding us that's, I hate to say it this way, that's kind of recruiting and poaching our talent because they know that they're better trained.
Wow.
That they're more skilled
Okay.
at handling a city like Gary, so they're reaching out to them, bringing them to their communities. Right. So making sure that if we can't give them a raise, can we give them a bonus? Can we make their work environment and culture a better environment for themselves? So, and just invoking that love and passion for the city to keep them. So yes,
smart.
in the future, do we want to expand and grow? Absolutely. I would not deny that, but we want to make sure we retain the ones that we have as well, giving them down payment assistance for a home, making sure that we collaborate with them and their families to give them that future.
That's great. That's great. Now, the down payment assistance, you just brought that up. Is that specifically to purchase homes in the city of Gary?
Absolutely. We want to encourage individuals. We have several positions open for our fire department right now. As individuals look, they may want to not just relocate because they may have lived in Gary before or want to move back into Gary. But we have those that are currently here. They may want to own a home that they may be renting. So we look at that as an opportunity.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I want to talk about, because we're speaking about growth for Gary, right? I want to talk about the schools because we know that when I speak to mayors across the region, one of the things that we discuss is that people who move to a community, they always look at the schools, right? They want to make sure that the quality of life is great, but they also look at the schools. About a week or so ago, we had the opportunity to sit down and interview the Gary Community School Corporation's new superintendent, Dr. Yvonne Stokes, lovely lady, by the way.
Yes.
And we began to talk about her vision for the school district, the plans that she has, and it sounds like the school district is off to a great start.
Yes.
We're off to a new era. So I want to ask you to take a moment, you yourself, to talk about what's good about the Gary Community School Corporation.
I'm a product of the Gary schools, right? So I hold them near and dear to my heart. And you've kind of come along this journey with me when I became senator, when it was taken over by the state of Indiana. It's kind of like the story comes full circle. When I left the Senate, it comes back to local control. So I think right now, the new board that's been established, the new leadership that's established, and the teachers that remain and stay with us through the hard times. I'm always going to be a proponent of tell folks that our greatest strength are the people. Our greatest assets are the people.
Right.
as a city, no matter if we're talking about our airport, our lakefront, all of the great amenities that we have, the infrastructure, et cetera, if it wasn't for the people of the city of Gary, we wouldn't have a city. And if it wasn't for the passion of those individuals that have loved this city for decades and those that are moving here and finding a new love in the city, I don't know where we will be. So I definitely commend the leadership that's at the school corporation right now that's putting the right path forward. And the public is going to see more of a collaborative nature between the city of Gary and the school city of Gary.
Great.
And as mayor of the city of Gary, I have to be very aware that the Gary School Corporation is not only educating institution, right? We have multiple other schools, charter schools, faith-based schools. So that's why I started the Education Roundtable, to put everybody around the table to figure out how can the city partner with the school corporations, and how can we use our platform to encourage them to collaborate as well. So I think just these first few months, we're off to a good start.
Absolutely. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that in your time at the State House, you were quite vocal about the Gary Community School Corporation being under state control, being managed by a consulting firm. And so to see, as you said at the start, full circle from the start of your time at the State House and you as mayor. The schools are back under local control.
Yeah, that was a tough time. When you look at over $100 million of debt and a variety of other issues, and what I have to remind folks, this wasn't a self-inflicted wound. This was a compound wound from state policies to also local decision-making processes that put us in that position as a community where our schools had to be taken over financially by the state of Indiana. And someone that's been passionate about it, I'm not shy to say the state has failed at funding public schools at the rate they should compared to other states. And I think that's something we can continuously improve on. But right now, having that school back in our local control that allows parents to see that that investment is worth making by either sending their students there or speaking more positively about the district compared to years past.
Absolutely. Mayor Melton, you have dubbed your hometown under your administration Greater Gary, Indiana. And I heard you say one time in a speech that if Gary is the heartbeat of America, that the Steel City is its heart, the heart and soul. Talk about Gary's assets, which you alluded to a little bit earlier, the great assets including the port, which you mentioned earlier, being the bookend to the Indiana Dunes National Park, you mentioned that a little bit earlier, the city's proximity to major highways, and I cannot forget to mention the Gary International Airport. So talk about the great assets of the city.
Man, I love doing that. You just reminded me of anytime I'm with my peers, other mayors around the country, and I have to remind them of who we are.
That's good.
I have to remind them of not just what we have, but where we've come from. And we've helped build this nation because of the steel industry, because of U.S. Steel, which found this city. And so many individuals from Eastern Europeans to blacks that migrated from the South that worked in the steel mill. We had almost 30,000 people that worked in the city of Gary. We almost had 200,000 people that lived in the city of Gary. So we are ingrained not just in Indiana, but throughout the nation in terms of what we've helped to contribute to this world. So when we talk about the heart and soul, I'm talking about the grit, the determination, the fight that we've shown over the years, the good and the bad times that helped us get to where we are now and to be resilient during those tough times, right? So yes, when I sit down with other communities, I talk about no other city that I'm aware of, and not many cities in the Midwest can say that they have an international airport, a deep water seaport, 3 Class 1 rail lines, which is Canadian National, Norfolk Southern, CSX, 4 major highways, I-90, 80, 94, I-65, right? They can't say they have 5 miles of recreational beachfront property in Lake Michigan. So all of these amenities and natural dunes, you talk about the national park, these are elements and pieces where people travel across the world to come see us. And we haven't, in the past, been able to capture that. And I appreciate this opportunity because we haven't been able to tell our story the way that we're able to tell it now. So, and this is this is our time and our opportunity. And not because it's me, but I think because the world is starting to hear about Gary more on a national level.
Yeah.
Some of the relationships we've been able to broker both on a federal and a state level, but issues that I'm dealing with and negotiating with a Japanese company that's trying to purchase U.S. steel with Nippon Steel to figure out how do we better have a relationship with the largest industry in the city, one of the leading steel manufacturers in the nation in our backyard. So we're in a really good position. We just got to tell our story.
Absolutely. So you just spoke about the Gary International Airport, and you spoke about relationships that you are forging locally, statewide, and nationally. And I'm thinking back to a time, I believe it was earlier this summer, if not earlier this year, when you had the opportunity to sit down and meet with Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously sing the praises of the Gary International Airport and offer to them, to the city of Chicago, via their airports, Midway and O'Hare, hey, we can take the traffic that you cannot handle.
Yeah.
And so I want to ask you, how are plans for for the airport going right now?
First let me just shout out Mayor Johnson. That's my brother. He's a good man. He's doing a phenomenal job trying to lead the city of Chicago to his resurgence as well. I mean, he has his issues just like Gary has his issues. So we talk to each other often, and when we talk, I share the opportunities that exist. And one of the last meetings I shared, I said, this is our airport together.
Great.
So I'm happy that there's an appetite to do more and better collaborate. But the reality is we are Chicago's third airport. Back in the early 90s when the compact was signed by then Mayor Daley and Mayor Barnes, that put us in a really strong position. So as we look to grow around private, around cargo, and passenger in the future, those opportunities exist and they continue to grow every single day. You're hearing about the investments that we're making. A lot of it, and I'm grateful for Congressman Mervan, a lot of federal dollars.
It was $24 million, correct?
Yes, just recently to come through.
Right.
Also, my last budget session, we were able to finance to help more to build out our infrastructure as well. So the airport is poised and positioned for greatness, but it's not just the airport. You got to look within just a mile radius of the airport. The airport is a foreign trade zone. So if you have a foreign trade zone on top of cargo opportunities to grow, freight, cargo from ship, we can be North America's new hub when it comes down for moving shipments of products from around the world. So I see that as a unique opportunity that we're going to be honing in more in the future.
That sounds exciting just to even think about that right here in the region.
Yep.
Now, I want to talk about a new and exciting initiative designed to help businesses grow and residents thrive. So the University of Notre Dame is teaming up with Gary in an effort to redevelop and revitalize the city's downtown. And I've heard chatter on social media, but I want to give you the opportunity to discuss those plans spelled out.
Right, so what Notre Dame has helped us do is think through opportunities.
Okay.
Right, Notre Dame is not coming in to make any investments personally. They brought their brilliant minds to help us facilitate conversations with hundreds of residents. This was not done in a vacuum. We, for over 5 to 7 days, hosted convenings where the residents of Gary were able to come to downtown and discuss what do you want to see.
So the community is involved in the discussions?
Yeah, from the beginning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So just that input helped us design those thoughts and take that input and to transform it into a final report that'll be coming out very soon.
Okay.
Right, so just to think about a world-renowned institution right here in our city that helped us think through how do we not only build for the future, but honor the cultural integrity, the structural, artistic integrity of our past, of our architectural design of downtown. A lot of folks need to realize as well, too, there are a lot of unsafe structures that may not be able to stay around forever. But how do we take the memory of those structures and still replicate that into future development?
That's good. I think that is probably some of the concern for some members.
Yeah.
Now, you recently, there was a recent press conference announcing the expansion of the GPT bus services and a strengthened partnership. Again, it sounds like our theme today is collaboration and
Absolutely.
partnerships, but a partnership with Greyhound. What will this mean for the economy, including job growth, not only in Gary, but for the entire region?
When you look at cities like Gary, and we're blessed to have location and proximity, Chicago being one of the world's largest economies, the region having a lot of opportunities from an employment perspective. GPTC, we are currently the only regional busing system.
Yeah.
And to have a national brand like Greyhound
Yes.
come to us and say, we want to help you grow and expand to get your residents and region residents to more locations, we jumped on that immediately. So to thank Denise Dillard and folks, the entire board for helping us to craft that partnership. And it's not only going to bring and transport folks throughout the region, there's going to be a significant investment in our train station, in our transportation station. We'll talk a little bit more about that and some of the legislation that we probably will get into, but it was just a unique opportunity that we couldn't pass by.
And it sounds like it's going to be so exciting, again, not only for Gary, but thinking about the region as a whole.
Yeah.
I, for one, was so excited to hear that great news.
Thank you.
Now, I want to share with you that I have spoken with a number of elected officials, both locally and statewide, and I always like to talk to them about tourism as a driver for economic growth for the community in which they serve. Now, I want to talk about your last year at the State House specifically because you authored a hallmark, and I have to say a hallmark piece of legislation, that's Senate Enrolled Act 434, also known as Economic Development for Lake County.
Right.
And again, I can't stress it enough, a hallmark piece of legislation. I want you to take a moment to share what this piece of legislation will mean for, again, obviously Gary, but the entire region.
There's a history behind it. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but
We have all the time in the world because this really and truly is phenomenal for the region.
So all of this wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for the gaming mechanisms that we have in the state of Indiana. In the late 90s, then Senator Erling Rogers, former Mayor Barnes, and a host of others, you had Vernon Smith and Charlie Brown, and so many other individuals that was responsible for bringing gaming into the state of Indiana. That funding has been able to fund a lot of things throughout the entire state, but a lot of communities have benefited from it as well in Northwest Indiana, from Hammond, East Chicago to Gary. It helps undergird the RDA for the entire region, Northwest Indiana. The RDA is responsible for getting the double tracking project across the finish line. If it wasn't for the gaming dollars that Gary, Hammond, East Chicago has, would we have the double tracking project? A lot of folks don't have that conversation.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
So it was 2019. I was helped to pass the legislation that moved our riverboat casino onto land base. What was the Majestic 1 and 2 in Buffington Harbor. 2 years later, it's the Hard Rock Casino on 8094. That wouldn't have passed if I didn't bring my colleagues from the General Assembly to Gary. I brought the Speaker Pro Tem. I brought the Chairman of Tax and Fiscal. I brought the Chairman of Ways and Means, of Appropriation, to show them what is the highest and best use of our lakefront. It's not this. It's not the gaming that's taking place in this industrial footprint. Allow us to move the gaming onto one of the most busiest highways in America, where we have 200 to 300,000 cars almost a day on 8094. And let's open this lakefront up for more port usage. Let's grow our commerce in that way. Fast forward, here we are today. With the Hard Rock Casino, we went from the lowest revenue generating casino in the state of Indiana with the 2 boats, with 2 licenses.
Really? Wow.
To the highest.
To the highest in the entire
for the
state.
past 3 years.
Wow.
So that revenue, I've seen an opportunity for us to reinvest. And also knowing that the state allowed the Hard Rock to be taxed as if they still had 2 licenses for a period of time, and that will fall off in 2025, which is next year.
Right.
So once we discovered all of this, we figured the state will make an additional $18 to $20 million more in 2025 of revenue that is not anticipating or wasn't expecting. How can we use that revenue to reinvest in the city of Gary, to reinvest in Lake County? And the bill does three things. Number one, blight elimination. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yes.
Specifically around the transit development district in downtown, around the double tracking. Number two, it helps us to fund a brand new train station that's going to come to fruition. The governor and myself, we have to appoint a new board before the end of this year for this train station for 2025. And that board will be responsible for the new construction of a train station. And lastly, which is the bid for a Lake County Convention Center. Now, let me unpack that a little bit.
Yes.
Because I think folks need to realize the original version of that bill was supposed to only be for Gary.
Yeah. Yep.
But when you're in the legislature, you have 149 other people to convince of thoughts and ideas, and some folks wanted it to be an option for other communities to bid for that convention center. Regardless of whoever gets it, it's going to be funded off the tax dollars that came from the revenue, the wagering taxes from Gary. So I'm happy that we partner with the Hard Rock Casino. We partner with AECOM, one of the world leading firms that help to design and develop convention centers and arenas around the nation. And we put a very compelling proposal together for the Lake County Commissioners. So Senate Bill 434 packages all that up, but it comes from a history of how did we get here today. So if it wasn't for Senator Erling Rogers and others, we wouldn't have this unique opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm glad that you went a little further and unpacked because there's been, again, chatter about it being originally for Gary. Now, you spoke about this just a moment ago, one of the latest infrastructure projects, and that's the double track line, which was completed in June. $650 million project, I might add, that will add a second rail line between Gary and Michigan City, correct? I want you to spend a moment, because we're speaking about economic development, economic growth. Speak about what the long-term economic impact of the double track line will mean for, again, not only Gary, but for the entire region.
Right. You think about, number one, the investment of $600 million and what that does to a community. Right. We had thousands of men and women that had been able to go to work to help build that line, and whether it was moving the rail or putting in the electrical, so many facets to that to help kind of ignite our economy locally. When folks think about our proximity to Chicago, and I tell my friends around the country, I say, you jump in a car, you'll be downtown Chicago in about 35, 40 minutes. They don't believe me.
Right.
So now I can tell them you can jump on a train and be downtown Chicago Millennial Park in 35, 40 minutes. They still don't believe me until they come.
Until they, okay.
So that's something that we have to maximize as a region. And that's no matter if it's Michigan City, Portage, both of those mayors, they are phenomenal. We've sat down and talked to say, how do we better leverage us being the three communities that touch the national park? There's an opportunity that's unlike any other communities in this state that we can partner and collaborate from a tourism perspective. We know that the national park, several millions of people visit that park, right?
Absolutely.
So we have to maximize and leverage that. But as individuals look to leave Illinois, businesses are leaving Illinois. We're getting phone calls from a lot of corporate entities that's looking to relocate throughout Northwest Indiana, and Gary is one of those prime locations.
Right.
They're looking at where's the taxes are cheaper, income taxes are cheaper, sales taxes are cheaper, property taxes are cheaper, the cost of living is cheaper. And you can still be to work downtown Chicago in 30 minutes compared to from the south suburbs where it may take you closer to an hour.
Yeah.
But if we're not selling that,
good point.
and if we're not promoting that, we're missing a unique opportunity. So the main thing when I came into office was, number one, let's stabilize our economy. in the city of Gary specifically. Let's lay the groundwork for future development, which we're doing with Senate Bill 434, so we can start telling that story. And we can let those corporations know the opportunities that exist with our infrastructure and just the residential opportunities as well for folks to live here. It's just a unique time.
Absolutely. So, Mayor Melton, I want to go back to your first few weeks in office. And even before that, even during the transition period from the previous administration, I remember seeing you travel the region, travel nationally at one point, but sort of kind of singing the gospel, if you will, or spreading the gospel, if you will, about Gary. And I remember back in January, I believe it was, I was at an event in Gary in which you were the keynote speaker. And I was there as a guest, excited obviously to see you, to see what you had to say, but I was there as a guest, not in my role that I'm in today. But I couldn't help but let the little journalist in me come out, and I began to take notes as you were speaking. Because everything that you said was compelling. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm the Eddie Melton cheerleader, but I have to say that everything that you shared in the keynote address was so compelling. And I remember at one point, these are my words, not yours, but you sort of issued this mayday regarding Blight. And you began to talk about collaborations and partnerships with other entities, including the Hard Rock Casino, to address Blight in the city of Gary. So talk more about the genesis of some of those partnerships and where we are today in addressing Blight.
Yeah, very good question. Very timely as well. When I have to put it into context for folks, we're the same city that was 52 square miles. We're still 52 square miles. I put it like this: San Francisco was 49 square miles.
Wow.
With triple our population, if not 10 times our population, pretty much. So it's a lot of ground to cover. We've lost a significant amount of people, population-wise. And let me preface that by saying this, because some folks will say it was because people were scared, it was crime. No. It's a history with that, with taxes as well.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And part of that is, as a corporate citizen, U.S. Steel decided to change legislation and self-assess, and that cut our budget as a city in half, and this was in the early 2000s.
Right.
So my previous mayors ago, they had to furlough, cut people off, cut departments, let police and fire go, because, and I don't want to say it that they weren't paying their fair share, but they weren't paying their accurate assessment.
Well,
You fast forward, that shifted over to homeowners, and people were losing their homes because of the property tax value that went up. So that's part of that narrative and story. It's not just the crime.
just the crime.
It's not just the other aspects that most people would say it is. You have to include the policies that was put in place. Because after that, it was the tax caps in 2009 that also prohibited, it helped the homeowners. But cities had to do more with less revenue because it capped it at 1%.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So again, that was another blow for a city like Gary that you're doing more with less.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to addressing the blight, the last number, I believe in the mid 2015 was close to 8,000 abandoned structures.
Wow.
That's both residential and commercial.
Okay.
I believe the hardest hit funds was sent by President Obama during the Freeman Wilson administration that helped attack, I would probably say close to 1,000 properties.
Wow.
So it only put a dent,
A small dent.
into that. So what we're doing is leveraging the state funding that we have. I've been going to Washington, D.C. I've been talking and meeting with HUD. I've been talking and meeting with everyone within the president's cabinet to figure out how do we better leverage federal funds that we are soliciting, but also how do we better leverage what we currently have on an annual basis. So you're going to see more blight elimination of dangerous structures that need to be gone.
Okay.
Right? That's the
Those are
priority.
priority? Okay,
Yes,
good.
that's the priority. If it's a dangerous structure, if it's burnt out structure, those are the priority structures that we're going to tackle immediately based off the state funding within the transit development district. That's per state law.
Okay.
Right now, we're requesting from the governor, Governor Holcomb, on his way out, if we can partner with the Ready 2.0 grant to say, help us with various neighborhoods to address blight throughout the city of Gary.
Okay.
So we have a strategy, we have a plan. Right now, we're going to execution of getting the funding, but also how do we better leverage relationships? And when we got in office, this is a story I have to tell. The Etna neighborhood,
Right.
Ruth Riley, Hassey Construction, Sealy Construction, all of these contractors came to us and volunteered their services
Volunteered their services.
and donated their energy and their resources, and we demolished over 40 structures in the Edna neighborhood.
Wow. Wow.
That right there set it off for us in terms of other corporations wanting to be a partner with the city of Gary.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
This time next year, they have agreed to do the same thing again. And that neighborhood alone
Wow.
will be totally blight free, right?
That's awesome.
So in just within a 1 year period of time, one neighborhood that had abandoned and burnt out structures will now be blight free. And now we're making those lots available for Gary residents to purchase,
Okay.
connecting them with banking institutions to say you can build your new home. So we're moving from neighborhood to neighborhood to do that the best that we can.
That is awesome. Now, continuing on blight, I have to ask you about an issue that has plagued the city of Gary, and that's illegal dumping. What are you guys doing to address that issue?
Again, partnerships, right? IDEM, the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, they provided us a grant of $500,000 to start tackling that issue. So I created a illegal dumping task force. There's some key hot spots in the city of Gary that we had to address, and that funding is helping us provide the technology with cameras and helping us with the funding to help clean up those sites for future development, right? But ongoing is a culture shift and change that we have to change, not just internally with people stopping littering and throwing trash out, but there's an external force of
Yes.
people that's not even from Gary.
Yep.
And if we see you and find you, we will get you. And we
Say
have
it to the
evidence.
camera. Say
We
it.
will get you. And we have evidence of that happening already.
That's good.
Every other week, we're catching individuals from various communities throughout Northwest or Northern Indiana
Yeah.
that don't want to pay a fee of going to a dump, and they'll go to an abandoned area or a dark, hidden area and dump their blight. So other policies that we're changing internally is that if you don't have a permit to rehab a home, we're cracking down on you, because typically if you're
good.
gutting it with drywall and shingles, folks are hiding and trying to dump it in somebody's neighborhood. We're stopping that.
Okay.
And we're putting more enforcement into it. We've increased our code enforcement officers to go out throughout the entire city. So we're putting the right mechanisms in place. Now we have to see it executed and implemented.
Okay. I want to ask you about a topic, speaking of blights and speaking of construction. I don't want to say demolition. I'm going to let you answer this. But it's a topic that is emotional for some, and that's the Genesis Convention Center. I think the last I heard, to bring the Genesis Center back to what it was, it would be upwards of $2 million or something like that.
More than that.
Oh, see, even more. So let me ask you this then.
Yeah.
If you could wave a magic wand, all things considered in terms of affordability and viability, could the Genesis Center be saved? And what are the plans for the Genesis Center?
Yeah. If I had a magic wand, number one, it would be saved if I had a magic wand.
Okay.
I was one of those individuals that grew up that had various family events and functions, basketball games, wrestling matches, notable entertainers from around the world that would come there, absolutely.
Right.
When we walked into office, that building had been closed for 3.5 years. It was totally stripped of its electrical, mechanical, and all of those infrastructure things to make a building run and operate.
Yeah.
We had an assessment done by very reliable contractors in the region to give us an assessment of what it would take.
Okay.
And just the basics, it would take upwards of $10 million.
Oh, 10 million, not 2.
Yes.
Wow.
To just make it functional and operational. That's not addressing any aesthetics.
Wow.
That's not painting the building, it's not new carpet, it's not,
Yeah.
that's just the basics, right? So what we're exploring right now is there an appetite among the development community, both regionally and nationally,
Okay.
that they want to do a public-private partnership and not selling the structure, right?
Okay.
I think that's where we went wrong, where other administrations went wrong in exploring to sell it to an unlikely or unviable partners, right? So we're trying to be smart about this. We're going to be smart about it and make sure it's the right investment. We would love to see mixed-use development, office space, still an event space, still have an opportunity to grow and have the community have some type of option to utilize it. But will it look like it is now? We don't know yet.
Okay.
Right? So putting a request for proposals is probably the option that we're going to do.
Okay. Yeah.
But if there are options to go in a different direction, we have to explore everything because number one is, as nostalgic that I am,
Yeah.
I have to be responsible for the taxpayer resources.
Yeah.
And what's going to be the best decision based off for the taxpayers and the citizens of Gary. Not based off just the nostalgia, but based off
Yeah.
what's the greatest and most important decision to make.
And it is important to be fiscally responsible, no matter how emotional you feel attached to that structure. And
it's
I get
hard.
it. It is
It's
hard. And I get it.
Yeah.
As you said, football, basketball, wrestling,
Graduations, weddings, yeah.
and my graduation there, I believe.
Oh yeah.
Yep, from IUN, absolutely. Now, Mayor Melton, in recent years, there has been an influx of people moving to the region from across the state line, from across Illinois.
Right.
Again, they're calling the region their home. They are looking at various communities, including obviously your city, but then they're looking out in Porter and LaPorte County as well. So I want to talk about housing for just a moment. Last week, the Gary Housing Authority opened their wait list lottery for their housing choice voucher. I want to talk about, and that list has since closed, but I want to talk about housing specifically, affordable housing, and if there are opportunities for housing developments in Gary.
Yeah. So we know it's a national housing crisis across the board. Again, another issue that we were looking to tackle when I was in the General Assembly, putting tools in place. We created housing TIF zones and TIF districts. And how do we better incentivize not only developers, but nonprofit developers like Habitat for Humanity, someone who we're partnering with as well in the city of Gary. But the way we're focusing on is a few ways. Number one, mixed use is going to be kind of the theme for downtown in terms of retail as well as housing. So with a very limited footprint, we want to try to accumulate as much opportunity and population density in downtown because it will recoup us more revenue based off the state statute.
Okay, makes sense.
But throughout the entire city, we want to provide our veterans with an option. Right now, community development is looking at veteran housing within the Veterans Village footprint near our Emerson neighborhood, and senior living. How do we create more of a senior neighborhoods that would give them the amenities that they grocery store, a drugstore, and walkable destinations, right?
Okay.
So that's where we're looking at. We have so much land and opportunity, but we're trying to figure out what's the best options. So before we go too deep into housing planning, I've tasked redevelopment and community development to fund a citywide master plan, comprehensive plan to figure out development in general. There are some portions of the city that have been vacated that we need to re-envision what that looks like in those areas. Unique opportunities for housing as well. But for single families, we have a lot of lots and structures, not so many structures, but more lots that the city owns itself that we're figuring out how do we dispose of this. So I've asked community development to create a program called Gary First. So if you meet a certain criteria, which they're still working on, this would allow Gary residents to first have the option before a developer comes in and take up all those properties and parcels to start making revenue off of it. We want to give families the opportunity for home ownership. So that's something that we're working on right now. The Gary Housing Authority, although it's a separate entity when it comes down to how it's managed and operated, but we're working together.
Okay.
We're working together, community development, redevelopment, planning and zoning, building department, as well as the Gary Housing Authority.
I love the idea of the Gary First, because I've seen in other communities where that community, and you can plug in the name of any city, was not first. The community members were not first. And as you alluded to, the developers were able to come in and buy up all of that land, and the community members themselves, who have spent many generations in that community, were kind of priced out of their community. And so I love that.
If I can just add to, it's not going to be just for the single family homeowner that wants to build or rehab a new home. Then we'll move to another tier of local developers.
Okay.
Are there local groups or individuals that's looking to purchase multiple parcels or build a multi-unit development? So we're looking at how to structure that in the most effective way. So I think we're right on the right track.
Absolutely. Mayor Melton, as we sit here today, we are 3/4 of the way into your first year in your first term as mayor.
Time has flown by.
Well, it seems like it's your fourth or fifth term. I'm just going to be honest with you. But I just want to ask you about your key priorities. What are your key priorities, and have you discovered along the way in just this year that you've had to reprioritize your key priorities?
Not so much. I think my key priorities has always been those that are urgent nature. Number one, stabilizing our fiscal status, right? I think we've right-sized the ship financially, and we're also trying to make sure we have a reserve for the future, for the unexpected outcome, be it if it's the economy, Lord forbid another pandemic or other situations. So I think we're at a stabilization period right now.
Okay.
It's prioritizing how do we finalize the rest of our ARPA dollars, American Rescue Plan dollars. That's going to benefit citizens directly. I don't think that previous dollars were directed to benefit the citizens as much in previous administration, but I think we're at a right portion right now where we're developing those programs that we're going to get those expended by the end of this year. And just stabilizing both kind of neighborhood stabilization. We haven't mastered that yet. As I met with my operations team, I tell them today, I said, we have to break the walls of the silos down from various departments. If Mrs. Jenkins, this is my fictitious Gary resident that lives on 17th and Wickham, I'm making his address up. If she has a tree down in her front yard, she's going to call the city of Gary, and she's going to ask for some help. She's not going to distinguish between what department did it, as long as it gets done for her.
Right.
So what I'm trying to express to our team is that citizens are relying on us to provide a service. So that neighborhood stabilization, we passed $3.5 million to do the street lights in the city of Gary. That's a huge issue that's been lingering for a number of years.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we've ordered the street lights, we use that funding. Everything is in path now for the contractor to get locked in. So
that's good.
We'll be seeing those street lights coming into effect pretty soon. It's not soon enough for me. I know my engineer gets tired of me asking him, like, where's the contractor, where's the equipment, let's get started. But I learned in government very quickly, it doesn't work as quick as you want it to. But I think we're heading in the right path.
That is good. Mayor Melton, we have about a minute or so left today. And I always, as part of this Meet the Mayor series, I always give an opportunity for the mayor to kind of pitch their town, to tell our viewing and listening audience, because it's not just viewers and listeners in the region. They come from across the state line, and we have a lot of people that tune in nationally as well. But I always give an opportunity to pitch your town. So take a moment to tell our listening and viewing audience why they should choose Gary as their home.
You know what I would tell them? I said, welcome to Greater Gary, Indiana, the home of the heart and soul of the state of Indiana, but not just Indiana, but the nation. The same city that helped not only forge the steel, that helped build the skyscrapers, the bridges throughout this country, but we're the same city that sits on the southernmost tip of Lake Michigan, that has some of the most beautiful summers with our Gary Chicago Air Show, with folks taking recreational opportunities on the dunes and touring and looking at our natural habitats of nature, but also the home of the Michael Jackson, the Jackson 5, and I got to throw Tito in there because
Gotta throw Tito.
That's my brother right there.
Absolutely.
But Denise Williams and so many artistic individuals that the culture of Gary permeates throughout the entire world.
That's true.
We're the same city that produced those legends. We're the same city that produced the same steel. We're the same city that has a resilient population that's still here, that is still thriving and striving.
Wow.
And regardless of what the world has said about us and what reputation they've tried to cast over us, we won't let that bring us down. And I guarantee you, Gary will be one of the greatest comeback stories in American history.
Absolutely. Mayor Melton, I have to say this. So you are obviously a man in demand.
I don't know about that.
You are a man in demand from your constituents to state leaders to local leaders to national leaders. You are a man in demand. And I just have to ask you this just as a personal level note, because you do it all. You do so much. You are constantly, you said you're up at 4:30 a.m. I'm still asleep at 4:30 a.m. But I just want to ask you, what do you do to unwind?
It's prayer and meditation.
Good.
That's the only way I get through day by day. It's my faith in God and the support of family and friends. Just being around loved ones, not talking about politics, not talking about, was the trash picked up or the snow plowed. It's just kind of being around loved ones. And I use this opportunity because a lot of folks say, I know you're busy, I know you're busy.
Yeah.
Even if you have friends that are busy, don't cheat them of the opportunity to help you or to be there for you because you think they're busy.
Wow.
I told my children this before I took office. I said, before anything, family first.
Good.
Right? And I wanted them to know that. That's why we'll take them down to the State House and we'll bring them to City Hall. And I want them to know that the sacrifices I'm making is not just for the city to improve, it's for them as well, because I want them to be able to live here, have the option to live here and grow here. So I'm weaving that into their mind to say that this is for us. This is not just because daddy is going off and he's trying to pursue any higher office or accolades.
Right.
But I know that's a long way to answer your question.
No,
but
that's good. That's good.
I don't do a lot of recreational chilling right now
Well,
because I love what I'm doing.
You lose at bowling.
I do lose at bowling. I am not good at bowling. Let's be clear. Let's be clear about that.
You lose at bowling.
But I just love this job, and I'm grateful to be here.
Good. Mayor Melton, I must say that I really and truly enjoyed my time with you today. Again, you're quite humble, but you are quite in demand. You're quite busy, and so we don't take it lightly that you carved out a lot of time to be with us today.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing Greater Gary, Indiana. Thank you again for spending time with us on Lakeshore Public Media.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yes. All right.
Absolutely.
Thanks.